Alrighty, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, February 24th, 2022 Watertown City Board of Adjustment. Brandy, can I get a roll call, please?
Yes. Dolly.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Brink.
Here.
Kays.
Here.
Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Aletsky.
Present.
Culhane.
Here.
And Hanson and Spire are absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Brandy. Moving on to item 3 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 10th, 2022 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review those, and do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
A motion and a second. Any additional discussion on those? Seeing none, we'll take a vote.
All right. Culhane.
Yes.
Aletsky.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Brink.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes. Those minutes are approved. We'll move on to the regular agenda, item 4A, which is a conditional use for a caretaker residence at the property located at 705 20th Avenue Southwest. Brandy, you want to take us through that?
Yes. Thank you, Blake. So this is a conditional use request for the property at 705 20th Avenue Southwest. I'll pull up this vicinity map. As you can see, it's currently zoned I-2 Heavy Industrial District. And what is being proposed and kind of where we're at with the ordinance, if this hatched area would be allowed to have the conditional use of a caretaker's residence, it would be conditioned that it would have to also be rezoned to I-1 light industrial because we don't allow caretaker's residences in the I-2 district. And that was just from the recent ordinance amendment. So it is typical, you know, that you would have the I-2 and the I-1 transition amongst each other. And the applicant and the owner of this is Grand Guard Construction. And then that would be Jeremiah and Heather Grandgard. And so what they're wanting to do is build a caretaker's residence out here to manage the operations of the 32-acre site. So for increased security and just overseeing the operations. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Case?
the proposed area of where the house or the caretaker's residence is going to be constructed, will that be platted into a new lot?
Yes.
And the proposed size of that lot is?
225,819 square feet. The minimum is 30,000 square feet in the I-1.
The other question on that location where the caretaker residence, are there any industrial uses going on the new proposed platted area? Is it all just basically vacant ground at this time?
There is a mechanic shop to the west there. And the thing about caretaker's residences is that it has to be occupied by the owner or somebody that's employed by the owner, and that it would be tied to a business.
So next follow-up question. So are we tying it to that shop business building, or are we tying it to the remainder of the I-2 property?
And in this situation, because they own both, it would be for all of it, but then in perpetuity, it would be with that lot. So we would have it just be the Grand Guard addition.
So so technically, they're asking for a caretaker residence to do caretaking the industrial property to the north of them, but not actually any ongoing industrial use in that proposed lot.
And there is a mechanics shop in that lot.
I could be living in the country in a house and have a mechanic shop in my backyard and it'd be zoned agricultural too at the same time, right? I guess where I'm at with it is, to me, I think the more permanent solution is tying this lot or this use, this caretaker residence, to the actual remainder of that I-2 property, whether that's in perpetuity or not, because I think it's somewhat of a ruse to not tie a caretaker's residence to the actual industrial uses that are going on the other I-2 portions of the property. And maybe what it is I just sat down and I'm just seeing this for the first time, the proposed easement on the property.
Yes. And can I explain that too?
Yeah.
So I handed out the waiver or the industrial easement and waiver. And so what that is stating is because with this area, as we all are familiar with the rail spur to the south of CHS and Ag Works, and the approved conditional uses for the train loading and unloading, the wind turbine blade storage, and the fertilizer manufacturing. They are approved for those conditional uses, which are in the I-2 heavy industrial. So what this waiver would be is acknowledging that those uses are going on, and they are pre-existing and will continue in the future, and that wouldn't disturb the residential nature of a caretaker's residence.
What happens to the caretaker's residence if and when the remainder of that I-2 property is sold to somebody else?
It would still be able to remain because it would be tied to an industrial business on that lot.
Yeah, I guess just looking at the I-1 permitted uses, the use that they do have on the proposed rezoned area does fit within the permitted uses of an I-1. So in reality, I think the consideration should be, you know, can the caretaker residence be appropriate for that use explicitly, since that's the lot under consideration. Whether or not they also support the I-2 is, I think, irrelevant in the scheme of how we can approve a conditional use for the caretaker's residence.
I'm looking at it from the perspective that, you know, we have adjoining residential property to the south on the fertilizer plant, and when any changes to that I-2 property, you know, we dealt with a very contentious issue last year when we had residences in close proximity to the I-2 zone. And what we're doing here, in essence, is we're putting a residence in the middle of an I-2 zone as well. And so my only biggest concern is going to be is what happens to the property that's I-2 to the north and east of this someday when the Grand Guards don't own that property, or Grand Guards sell that house to, say, me, and somebody else does something on that proposed to an I-2 intensive use to the north. Does this easement, I haven't had a chance to read it yet, does it deal with that? That's my question.
Yes, and now did I give out all my copies?
I would like to remind, you know, the board and stuff that the contentious with the railroad, them houses were there a long time before the railroad were. The people here, the Grand Cards, they know it's there.
But Grand Guards are only renting this space for a period of time. There will be somebody else living in that property in the future, no different than those people that lived to the south. I mean, so my point is that you're going to be putting a residence in the middle of an I-2 zone, which is something we don't normally do,
Yeah.
right? I mean, whether you have an I-1 island in the middle of it, it's not something we would normally allow. And so I'm just, and if we go down this road, I'm not arguing against it. I just want to make sure that the city has no exposure when the I-2 lands to the north and the east change hands, and if somebody wants to do something objectionable, which would be allowed in an I-2 zone, but in proximity to an I-1 caretaker's residence, which maybe that business goes away at some point in time, and then you do have just a house and somebody with a horse and using that machine shed as a stable.
You can't have horses in the industrial
Well,
area.
my point being is that the use that's being proposed is not going to be a perpetual use to a single owner forever. And so I'm trying to be forward-thinking and cutting off all potential entanglements that we might be having down the road. That's all I'm looking at.
Right. And
I think there's a fundamental difference, though, between a single-family residence zoned in a residential area versus a caretaker residence, right? So even if the ownership did transfer with this I-1 lot and that industrial use ceased, it's still only allowed, that residence is only allowed under a caretaker's.
So we're going to
conditional
make
use,
them
right?
move the house if the business stops being done on that property.
they would
What
have
is the legal jurisdiction there? If there's no I-1 use any longer and there's a home there, can you live in it as a single-family residence? It's not.
Well,
It's not authorized.
the answer would be no, but that's my point. Again, we're, you know, there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts in what's going on here, and we're treating this one particular use as just going to be a standalone use and it's never going to change. But things always do change, and so that's where I'm just making sure that we are on sound foundation, that we don't have to be telling somebody, Mr. Grangard sells it to Stacy, and 5 years later, Stacy doesn't have a mechanic shop there, or doesn't intend to have one of the I-1 businesses listed there, but just still wants to live in this house, because it's not, a caretaker residence can be anything. It could be a $750,000 house, or it can be somebody living in the shed, right?
Well, and that's always with the caretaker's residence that we could run into that. And if that were the case, then it would be out of conformance, and say that there was an issue or they came in for a building permit and it was brought to light, well, then it would have to be addressed.
Do we have any other caretakers residences in any I-1 or I-2 zones that would look like a conventional single-family house?
And the applicant is here if he wants to speak to. I don't believe that, I think they were wanting to do more of a house construction to have it fit the
Okay.
general compatibility with the uses.
It's not that I'm against what the Grangards want to do. I think this is a nice way of trying to find a fit. I'm just making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
Mr. Chair, this is Stacy. If I could just jump in for a second here.
Yep.
Thank you. I understand where Commissioner Kays is coming from, because it may be a little bit unusual to have a separately platted lot with just a caretaker's residence. So that could be sold at some point in time without the business on there. So I think it is a relative question, or relevant question rather, to ask Mr. Grangard if he intends to have a business on that particular lot where the caretaker's unit will be.
Yeah, and I'll open the public hearing, if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against. Well, we're,
I'm Jeremiah Grangard.
Come on.
Meet you guys.
Jeremiah, come.
yep.
I guess I do.
Jeremiah.
Oh, come up to the microphone.
Come to the mic.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. So I guess I'd be willing to make it secure as saying that we would not be selling the property. Oak Valley is going to be a business for probably ever. That's what that land is out there. Our intentions are to build more shops and do more of that activity out there. And we could leave that is that the house would never be sold with that business. That would always remain as what you guys would accept.
Would be so inclined to put that on a restrictive covenant on the property, that the residential structure would have to be sold in conjunction with a business or businesses associated on that property.
And if it did sell, that would probably be more enticing for somebody to buy the business, because
Right.
there'd be so much activity there that they would be able to stay there. And I mean, we could maybe, if you guys would accept like a rental, the person could rent it, also, if they didn't want to say somebody bought it, and they could rent it to somebody that works for them that bought that place, for say.
I wouldn't have an issue. I think this is a plausible solution, that you can straight face say that there's a long range ability to handle those situations in the future on transfer of property. And again, whether it's the person that owns the business or has a worker that's he's renting it to, I think that meets our rules, right, Brandy?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mr. Chair, if I could interject one more time, please. It's
Yep.
Stacy. I just wanted to also just add to the conversation that even though it would be platted off separately, we could use something like a development lot agreement or restrictive covenant that could be filed, basically saying that the lots would transfer together. So that would be one way of ensuring that the house didn't get sold off separately in the future. So that would be maybe one plausible solution. You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, I have a question, please.
Yes.
Brandy, what do we have a definition of a caretaker's residence,
Yes.
per se?
Yep, so it's defined as a single-family dwelling unit, which it will be considered an accessory use to the primary business. The individual residing at this residence must own or be employed by the business. No home occupations will be allowed.
We have no bedroom, no square footage, nothing like that, restrictions?
No. They would
I got a
have to
general
meet
question.
the IBC and IFC standards when they would come in for a building permit to make sure that, you know, there was proper means of egress and bedrooms and whatnot.
Mr. Chair, this is Ford.
Yes, Ms. Ward.
I'm so grateful for everything that Todd discussed and all of the conversation, but throughout that. But I'm looking at here that one of the main reasons the caretaker residence use was moved from a permitted use to a conditional use was so the board can be made aware of the location of these units and provide for life safety measures. And I guess I'm looking at that I-2 property on the south, which we had dealt with and struggled with so significantly, the railroad spur, fertilizer plant, et cetera. Now we're talking about putting a standalone 3-bedroom house right next to that. 3 bedrooms means children. The water there is an attractive feature, but I think right next to that railroad spur, that fertilizer plant, I have a big issue with safety concerns. And it's also my recollection that we've had other requests for caretaker residents. We discussed the possibility of children and the safety issues, and that was something that the board really was quite concerned about, and I am very concerned about that.
Currently, I don't think we address that in our ordinance, neither the definition or elsewhere, do we?
No.
I guess I'm kind of on the same page with Diana. We're just opening a can of worms here. I mean, if we want to have residential, let's have residential. If we want to have industrial, let's have industrial. I appreciate the fact that, you know, you may need security, but we also have, you know, we have a lot of other industrial plants in town that aren't putting people living at them because they're concerned about theft or vandalism or what have you. You know, Terex isn't putting up a caretaker's home on their property because they're concerned of that. So where this is situated, I guess I'm concerned about, you know, the fertilizer. You've got railroad tracks, you have noise, and I mean, again, they're going to choose to live there. That's their prerogative, absolutely. But I just don't think that spot zoning a 3-bedroom house in an industrial setting is what we want to do.
And that, the 3-bedroom, Rhonda, I think that you're looking at in the packet, that was a previous building permit that was issued in 2013, and it was never completed. And then, so that was, and that's when it was a permitted use in the I-2 district. And then we changed it just recently in 2020 to have it be the conditional use, so that we would be able to monitor where these were going, because
Well,
otherwise they were just permitted.
So, to my point, a caretaker residence to me is someone that's standing guard 24/7, whatever whether these people switch off. You need a bed, you need a kitchenette, you know, and the next guy takes his shift. That to me is a caretaker residence, not, you know, full-fledged living quarters. That's just how I guess I see it. In industrial living, we shouldn't have the worry of need of if there are going to be children out there. It should be an adult who is actually guarding the property, if that's what we're trying to convince our board that that's what they're doing.
Well, and so that building permit though, that's not necessarily what would be built today. And if Jeremiah, do you want to speak to, I guess, what you were thinking for the construction of it, or what it would be?
Yeah, it would be like a Sprouse house. It'd be a house, I guess, but it would be a building with a house inside it, like a Sprouse house with a garage, and then it would be a yard, with a fence around it.
So would that be something that children could live in potentially?
We would, I guess, I don't know if, we would basically, you'll build it for the people that are in our immediate family. So there would, it'd be our family. But, I mean, it's not for, per se, that we're,
But your children are important too.
very important. Yeah. The thing is we've owned that place for 10, 12 years, and our children have been out there, and there is children around that area. Yeah, it is kind of a dangerous area, maybe with the railroad tracks. Some are a ways away, and there is truck traffic there. We've not had any accidents per se there. I mean, yet, I guess. I understand there's a safety concern.
I'd like to ask the fire safety, do you guys have any questions or any concerns with this home there?
From a, fire and safety standpoint, as far as access to that area, I said I've been out there numerous times when it was previously when Oak Valley Farms was there for different types of calls. As far as access with our ambulances, with our trucks, I've spoken with Adam on this, and we don't see any safety concerns as access to that area or, any type of firefighting activities, ambulance, as far as any of those duties out there. I said, I agree to that. I mean, there's obviously being in the area it is with railroad tracks, fertilizer plant across the street. Yes, there's obvious safety issues there, but, on the other end too, agriculture coming from a farm, there's safety issues there all the time. So yeah, we don't see a problem as far as access with trucks and ambulance.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Case?
Brandy, so the property is zoned I-2, and in the staff report, it talks about that the I-2 district allows for a caretaker residence as a conditional use. Is that,
No, the I-1. It would have to be rezoned to I-1.
okay, I misread, okay, because it says has been amended which prohibits caretakers as either one, so that's why we have to go with the I-1.
Just from a general question standpoint in the sequence of events, how is it that we can approve the conditional use for the I-1 with it still zoned as I-2?
And that we've seen before, that it's basically the conditional use, because for the applicant to know to move forward, they need to know if the use is allowed for one. Otherwise, then they would have other plans for the property. And so we have seen those. We've done this before.
We know we don't like that, some of us. But the other question is, have you seen a preliminary plat or what it would look like? Has the dirt team looked at that at all? If we think that we're going to be requiring a plat, have we seen what that plat would look like?
Yes, that it didn't require the DRT review.
Okay.
But it would be this. I'll flip it here. It would be this area, which then with the vicinity map, you can see it's the hatched area. The white hatched.
And are there any issues? There are no issues from a rural water perspective because it's on city water right now?
Right.
Okay.
Yep, this area is annexed and zoned.
This
is court again, Chair. So what
Sorry,
we're,
Diane?
what we're talking about is pocket zoning, essentially, down the road. Is that correct? I-2 to I-1, this little pocket in the middle of the I-2 lots?
It
Am I
does,
right?
it does, in the comp plan, it's just specified as industrial. So, we can have the transitional zoning or intermix of industrial with the I-1 and I-2. And the I-2 is basically, it is the I-1 district, but then it has allowances for conditional uses, which then the board would have to approve. Everything that's a permitted use in the I-1 is only a permitted use in the I-2. Then everything else in I-2 has to get a conditional use for.
So the bottom line, as I see it, is that we're talking about pocket zoning, I-1, and we have some tentative agreement from some of the speakers that there are some safety issues out there with railroad tracks and fertilizer plants, notwithstanding that you would also find that on a farm. We, as my vote goes, I'm voting on this specific property, not what a farmer does on his farm, and what the city looks at when it relates to safety. I have real trouble with the whole concept here on several points.
And for Diana and Blake online, I passed this, and just anyone else online too. I shared the industrial easement and waiver of setback from existing I-2 heavy industrial district uses, and that's what I passed out to the board, just for full awareness of language that could be implemented as well to run with the property.
But it wouldn't change the railroad spurs and the fertilizer plant in the adjacent property.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
It's just an acknowledgement that they do exist, as well as other industrial uses.
Okay, thank you, Brandy.
Yep.
And I think, Diana, in relation to the pocket zoning, we do typically have in industrial areas a mixture between I-1 and I-2. And when we look at the size of the lot, it's a little bit deceptive looking at that aerial view because those other areas are so large. We're talking about 225,000 square feet. Is that right, Brandy? Somewhere in that neighborhood?
Yep.
So from a standpoint of how many I-1 lots you could plat in there, you're talking 7+, meeting the minimum lot square area requirements for the I-1 district. So I don't know that I can constitute that as pocket zoning in that standpoint, but that doesn't alleviate the other concerns that you raised.
Thank you for that perspective on the pocket zoning. I appreciate that explanation. And you're right. The perspective is difficult to see.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
Randy, or maybe Matt, did you assist in the preparation of this document?
Yeah, Brandy crafted it. I think it was something that she had a template that was maybe from the county,
Yep.
and I helped tweak it a little
I'm
bit.
familiar with the language. I just wanted to make sure that there was some legal counsel.
Yeah, I did tweak it. Yes.
While I have the public hearing open, is there anybody else to speak on behalf or against?
I just want to make one note, the railroad tracks are quite a ways from that property.
Right.
I mean, there's a slough there, a road, there is farmhouses that are further down the road that are near there. The children, whoever did live there, or how it would be for us, we're out there anyway. I mean, I've lived there, we've pretty much not lived there, but we spent a lot of time out there, regardless of the railroad tracks. The truck traffic in front, there is trucks that drive by there, so I mean, that's maybe a point, but I'm just let's say that the tracks are quite a ways from that property.
Is there a reason that you're plating off so much with the house?
Oh, for all, well, I guess just to make whatever you guys will accept, I guess, is what I'm up for. It can be less or more. It doesn't have to be a certain square footage.
And was that to incorporate the mechanic shop so that it would, and if you guys want to do that, the deed restriction or the covenant that the properties would run together type of thing too. But I was thinking that it was so that the mechanic shop, the business, would be on that property.
According to the ordinance that we have, that requires the industrial use on the same platted lot.
Yep. And then, and that, it's within the setbacks too, with that footprint of the plat.
I have a question, if that's okay, Blake.
Yep.
So I'm reading the caretaker's residence, and I know Brandy read it out loud, but it just kind of has me confused a little bit because the definition is 2 sentences, and the first sentence says a single family dwelling unit, and the second sentence starts with the individual residing at this residence. So I guess, is our thoughts for what a caretaker's residence is it for a single family or is it for an individual? And I guess however we vote tonight, I think it'd be pertinent to maybe modify that definition to match that if it needs to be. I mean, are we allowing a whole family, a whole single family dwelling unit, or do we want just one individual?
I kind of like it, it's a single-family residential dwelling unit, which by the other section of the ordinance would allow up to 3 or 5 unrelated adults to live in there, right? I couldn't remember what the number was, so I said 3 to 5.
You got it.
And then whether or not, but the individual or individuals that work at this place one of them would have to reside in there, correct?
Right.
I mean, that's my interpretation. I mean, I don't know if that's what everybody else is thinking, but that's my view on it.
I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page, so I appreciate that. Just, I'm trying to make sure we're following it correctly.
Well, I guess getting back to that's what I'm saying. To me, a caretaker, when you say a caretaker, it is the guard man at the door, at the gate, not a family, not him and his buddies, it's someone in hired that works for me, that lives in the house, the little apartment. I'm not even going to call it apartment. I'm going to call it a kitchenette and a cot. It is not his permanent residence. When I'm on duty, I'm watching the gate. That's caretaker to me. And I think that like I said, down the road, we're going to have more. We've had these already. So I think we need to clean our books and say, what are we opening ourselves up for? If we want kids living everywhere, then why do we have any rules? Let's just, open the gates and let everybody live in their contractor shops. I'm having a real issue, just like Diana. We need to make a definition here. I'm sure he does a great business. It's nothing personal. I just don't want to see us up here every other week allowing children to live in industrial settings. That is not what we're here for. I get it. There's farms. I grew up on a farm. I grew up in an industrial setting. And that maybe would explain a lot of things. I don't like the idea that we are allowing other people than just the caretaker who's supposed to be watching the gate, living there.
Do you classify as children as, our children are out of the house? We're not talking about 3, I know a child's an 18, depending on like an 18-year-old decision making, where he roams around the property to where a 4-year-old roams. I'm just, just saying, depending on what you mean by children.
And when I asked the question, I just kind of like Todd was saying, looking into perpetuity. If we build a house there, we don't know who the next person will be or people will be, and so that's kind of how I look at it. You'll probably be there for, 20, 30, 40 years, who knows, but, at some point, someone else will be there, and if it is a house, they are more likely to have, a different family.
Sure.
I think there is a point of clarity issue, Jeff and Todd, in the way that we've got that wording in there, individual versus single family, certainly do elicit different concepts in your mind, right? And we probably should have some conformity there.
I guess to me, I look at it, when I'm looking at that definition, I'm looking at 2 things. The structure itself is the single-family dwelling unit. That's how I read this first sentence, is that I'm not building a duplex, I'm not building a triplex, I'm building a single-family unit. Mm-hmm. And then who lives in that unit is the second, and that has to be somebody that's related to the work, to the business. So that's how I'm envisioning it, and it makes sense to me. It's a 2-step definition. What it is that I'm building and who's living there. That's how I read that definition. and again, back to where I'm at, you know, the safety aspect, it's not that I'm not concerned about the safety aspect of it. I'm looking at more of how this moves forward in perpetuity. And if when we get to the point of making a motion, I will make a motion or support a motion to approve, subject to some sort of legal piece of paper that says those properties will be sold together, or that if there has to be a business associated with this single-family dwelling unit forever, or the single-family dwelling unit goes away. How that language is crafted in a legal form that's, you know, that can withstand the test of time, that's beyond me, but that's something that I would support.
At this point, I'll close the public hearing.
For the purposes of discussion, I will try to formulate a motion. I move approval of the request as submitted, subject to the applicant signing at least a document containing the information provided in the industrial easement and waiver of setback from existing I-2 heavy industrial district uses, with an additional codicil to be constructed by staff that stipulates the building, dwelling unit, caretaker residence has to be transferred in tandem with a business or one of a piece of the property on the adjoining I-2. It doesn't have to be on that I-2. It could be on their I-1 property, but it has to have, Matt, you'd have to, you know, try to craft something, but as long as we're still meeting the intent of what the ordinance says today moving forward, I think there should be some sort of miscellaneous deed restriction on that property, that, or lot agreement, or whatever you guys call it, to make that happen. Sorry, I got a little bit verbose there.
Would you repeat that motion? No. I'm just kidding. I will second that motion.
Is that clear to you, Mr. Roby?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think we understand what the intent is.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any final discussion or comments from the board? Okay, we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote, please.
All right. Culhane.
Yes.
Aletsky.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson.
No.
Kays.
Yes.
Brink.
Yes.
Ford.
No.
Dolly.
Yes.
Do you have that?
So that motion carries.
Yep, 5-2.
And that was the only agenda item on the regular agenda.
Yes, and then just for a follow-up too, it's also conditioned that they will go forward with the rezone of that property.
And that would appear at a later plan commission agenda?
Yep. So it'll be that 225,000 square feet that is shown.
Plat and rezoning.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought that was in the report, so that's why.
Sounds good. I just wanted to clarify that.
Moving on to item 5 on the agenda is the open public comments. Is there anybody here to speak on an item that wasn't on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on. Is there any new business?
None that I have.
Any
I
from
do
the
have
board?
one thing, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you to this board and thank you for the opportunity to allow me to serve as your manager for the past year and a half. It's meant a lot to me. I have accepted another position in Ada, Oklahoma, and I will be leaving. My last day will be March 4th, but I just wanted to say thank you, and I really appreciate all of your dedication that you have for this community. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with you, And just wanted to encourage you to keep serving your community as you are. You've done a fantastic job, and I just feel very honored and blessed to have been a part of it. There have been a lot of accomplishments that we couldn't have done without this board and staff and the city council and everyone. So it's definitely was the toughest decision of my career, and I just wanted to say thank you so much. I very much appreciate it.
Wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck.
Thank you, Stacy. You've done a
Thank you.
stellar job here as well.
Thank you so much.
Come on, Stacy, you're gonna miss this 15 below, let's face it.
Just more tornadoes in Oklahoma, though.
I know I might.
Yeah.
I'll be melting in the summer and thinking, oh.
No, yes, thank you, Stacy.
Thank you. It's been an absolute honor and privilege to be able to work with the staff here and the boards and everyone, because I've worked in multiple city governments, and in multiple states now, and I just have never seen such a hardworking, dedicated bunch of people that really want to serve their community. So it's just been an honor for me to be a part of that. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Is there any old business that we need to discuss?
None that I have.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
You take a vote on that?
All right. Cohen,
Aye.
Aletsky,
Aye.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Brink,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.